All right, folks, welcome to a special edition of a XenTegra webinar. This is my industry-focused webinar, so thanks for joining us today. We're going to be focusing on business continuity and business continuity planning and how Citrix fits into this whole story around our uncertain future and remote work strategy. I mean, this year has been very interesting, and I'm excited. I got a great panelist this week, and I'm excited to introduce everybody on the panel. So my name is Pete Downing. I'm the CMTO and host of today's webinar. But on the call, I got a bunch of great panelists. And first, I want to start off with Mr. Matt Kidder, who is the man who corralled this topic. And Matt, if you take a quick moment to introduce yourself.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. My name is Matt Kidder. I'm a client executive here at XenTegra. I'm going to be monitoring our questions today. So if you guys have anything that pops up, feel free to put them into that question area and I'll make sure we get them taken care of. So thanks for your time, guys.
Yeah, and thanks for the idea and concept, Matt. So, and then also on the line, I got the I'll call him the business continuity ninja, Jason. So Jason, give yourself a quick intro. How long you been at Citrix?
Hey, good morning, Pete. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for the intro. Again, I'm Jason Policy. I'm the lead SE for Citrix here based out of Ohio, covering Ohio, India, and Kentucky. And I've been doing Citrix stuff for, I hate to admit, in a public forum, over 20 plus years. And I've been with Citrix now coming on 5 years.
Cool. And also on the line, we got a local SE to some of you, Andy. So Andy, give yourself a quick intro.
Hey, thanks, Pete. Andy Morris here. Been utilizing Citrix or working with Citrix for almost 10 years at this point. Been with the company for about a year and a half directly, and I am based out of Michigan in the Detroit area. Thanks for the intro, Pete. Thanks for hosting.
Nice. And then last but not least, a longtime industry friend, Todd Smith. He and I go way back. Todd, if you want to give yourself a quick intro.
Sure. Hey, Pete. Thanks for having me join this distinguished panel. It's always great to work with you again. Pete and I started exactly 2 weeks apart from each other at a startup that was acquired by Citrix. Pete likes to say that I stole his job, but I just kept the seat warm for him before he showed up. But great to be here today. This is a very relevant topic when it comes to business continuity. And looking forward to hearing more about what's going on.
Cool. And yeah, thanks for joining, Todd. I know you're a busy man. So, all right. So just for everybody on the call, so Matt kind of said it earlier, but yes, we are on a GoToWebinar, and yes, we have the Q&A dialogue. So if you have any questions at all, we got a lot of great panelists today, and they can be as simple as, Citrix cloud questions. So if you have any questions, please ask. I mean, and if we can't get to them, hey, we'll get to them. We'll follow up, and we'll make sure we answer any and all questions if there's a lot that come in. But we encourage it. It helps drive conversation. And if we have to end up ditching the PowerPoint, hey, why not? Today's agenda is pretty simple. I'm going to be running through some topics and opening up the line for discussion and really talk about business continuity. But then more importantly, how does Citrix fit into the whole story? And then how does it tie into, this presence that we're in today, which is, the whole status of remote worker, right? And how does it fit in? So we're going to talk a lot about not only remote work, but also how does security twine into that? And then more importantly, business continuity planning. But before we do, just really quick kind of shout outs, webinars.xentegra.com. You can check out all the webinars that are coming up this year. I have a lot of great guests coming up on my webinar Wednesdays. I'll probably do a few more of these industry focused ones, and a little sneak peek. I'm working on a concept and I'm hoping to pilot it in November. So keep an eye out for that. And yes, today, everybody who attends gets a Grubhub credit. Little asterisk here, if you didn't provide a business email, please be nice to Megan. She's just doing her job and her diligence. We do ask that you give us a business email because we like to verify that you say who you say you are and that you actually work in IT. So again, just be nice to Megan and myself. We just have to follow up with you if we don't get a business email. Also, as part of my October, I am giving away a LG Gram laptop for anybody who attends webinars. Well, obviously one laptop, and you get put into the drawing. And then I have prize number 2, a North Face Ridgeline jacket. And then finally, prize number 3, XenTegra hat. So 3 winners across the month. And the more you attend, the more chances you have to win. A little sneak peek, I'm going to be giving away something really cool next month, so keep an eye out for that. Events.XenTegra.com. We have a lot of great events coming up. Definitely check them out. Everything from mini workshops, full day workshops, WBD workshops, etc. And then finally, podcast.XenTegra.com. If you're a podcast person, we do 3 different podcasts, and check those out. They're all available on the various mediums. And then, yes, I'll talk about this towards the end, bronco.XenTegra.com. And this topic actually fits in very nicely with one of the requirements. And I'll talk about how you can qualify for this drawing next year. We are giving away a Ford Bronco. I wish I could have one in my driveway. And then finally, follow Citrix and XenTegra on social media. It is worth it, especially on LinkedIn, Twitter, whatever your flavor of choice is. And we will record this webinar, and it will make its way up to our YouTube channel. So definitely give us a follow, and we look forward to getting you guys as followers. All right, and finally, the poll. I got some fun polls. I love data, as some of you know. Some of you may not know that, but I'm going to ask some fun polls today to get the audience involved and pulled into the conversation. So the first one is, my enterprise has a remote worker strategy for the foreseeable future. And I'll just throw this out there. The answers are anonymous. We can't see your data, and others can't see your data. This is just purely data, and that's it. So don't be afraid to answer, and it helps us drive the conversation. So I'll give a couple seconds. And I did see a question pop up. When do we give out the Grubhub credits? We typically do it within the day before the following day's lunch. So gets them out by the end of the day, if not first thing in the morning. And if you don't see it, definitely reach out. We can instruct you how to see it. She tries to send a nice little email on how you get the credit. It's not a credit as you guys know it. It's more of like a credit in your checkout. It's like hidden, if it makes sense. So but anyway, that's we do it within 24 hours of the event. All right, closing this poll. A lot of you fall into the 50% bucket. I love when we got about 100 people on, because it actually provides a nice snippet of data, and this aligns to some of the trends I'm seeing. I've asked this question about across 4 different webinars, and it does align to that trend. A lot of you are in this, like, this 50 to 79% bucket where you're working from home part-time or 50-50. And so it does fall nicely into some of the trends I'm seeing in the industry right now. All right, let's talk about business continuity plan. Now, this is prior to the pandemic. So prior to the pandemic, would you say you had a solid business continuity plan? So before this whole thing ever happened and you guys, everybody's happy and we're all working and going to the offices, do you think you were prepared? And so this is just a fun question, before and after, right? So I'll let this come in as it's coming in. Yeah, I think it's interesting to see how this thing unfolded and how it forced a lot of us, meaning IT professionals, to figure out how to address our end users' needs. And this is one of the things I love about Citrix, is the end user is kind of the focal point of all the strategies that they have behind their various products. All right, last call for clicks, going once, twice, and close. So we got a lot in the no bucket, which is expected. We didn't expect this, right? And yeah, you might have had VPN in place, but you're probably finding out VPN is not very effective, right? And those who said yes, maybe you are a Citrix customer. Maybe you already had something in place and you've been doing Citrix a long time. I can say personally, I've been remote my whole career. So for me, this was just a little small blip, right? Minus travel, which I actually welcomed. All right, here's the after question. So now that you guys are all into this, all right, how is your business continuity plan now? So do you have a business continuity in place moving forward? So how would you assess yourselves now? And again, be honest here, because that's what we're going to talk about today. And it's funny, I'm talking about, travel wise, it's like, I'd say that's the biggest thing that impacted me, is I don't travel as much, and I'm actually kind of liking it. So, all right, last call for clicks, going once, going twice, and last call. So it's almost 50-50 now. So some of you still said, yeah, I'm there, but there's still a good chunk of you that, hey, we can still get better. And hopefully we can give you some good anecdotes on, how do you get better and why. All right. All right, next question. Two more. All right, just a fun question. Who owns Citrix? So my enterprise is using Citrix Cloud / Workspace today. Now I'll kind of explain the answers as they're out there. Hey, are you a full production, Citrix Cloud customer? Are you using the hybrid rights? Are you kind of on-prem in the cloud? Do you own the licenses, but you're still on-premise? Are you still considering it? And no, why should I move? So you're still hardcore on-prem, and so, answer the one that best fits you. And again, this is just a fun data snippet to see how 100 people answer, and we're actually over 100 now, which is pretty cool. So give us a couple more seconds. We're going to talk about Citrix Cloud a little bit today, but if you want to dig deeper, I run a monthly workshop on moving to Citrix Cloud. So again, if you want to learn how, why, and how, definitely, check out my workshop. It's a 4-hour commit now. I've turned it into a little demo workshop because the labs are just hard to do now. So, definitely check that out. All right, last call for clicks. And we got a lot of no. So Todd and Jason and Andy, we got a lot of people to convince that Citrix Cloud's a good strategy. So I'm excited. I always like a good challenge. All right, last question. And I may throw some fun ones out. Jason's going to surprise me. Maybe we will, maybe we won't. But final question. My enterprise is evaluating or using an infrastructure as a service compute service today. So are you using, Azure? Is Amazon your big choice? Pick the one you primarily use. I know you could be using both, but pick your primary. And again, I use this as kind of a good anecdote, kind of industry, driver question. All right, last call. And boom. So it's funny. It's like Azure is the leader right now. And what's interesting is if I asked this question probably 3 years ago, it'd probably be Amazon. And it's funny to see those two flip-flop. It's also interesting to see the Google as well. And I like asking this question because it trends different ways depending on the market, the marketing, and et cetera. So it's pretty interesting to see this. And obviously, if you're in the no bucket, listen, I get it. You might define cloud as something different. If you're in the yes other, I also include things like Rackspace or AT&T. You're in a cage, or you're in an Equinix, data center. I include that as well. So cloud is how you define it sometimes. All right, so that was my polls for right now. We're gonna have a little fun. All right, so let's dig in and talk about Citrix and business continuity, and really talk about what is business continuity, and really the goal here is how do I make sure that the enterprise is always up. And so there's a lot of stuff that happened this year, but primarily, we got this pandemic, and now we're forced to work from home, and a lot of us, I'll be frank, weren't very prepared, and so we had to ebb and flow pretty quickly to figure out how do we address the needs of our end users, aka our customer, right? And some of us might have not had Citrix in place. Some of us probably had it in place. Maybe our networks couldn't handle the traffic. Maybe our edge couldn't handle the traffic. Maybe my infrastructure couldn't handle the load. So there's a lot of things that play into business continuity. But take the pandemic out, I mean, there's a lot of other things that could cause needs for business continuity: hurricanes, earthquakes, forest fires. I mean, there's a lot of different things. It's not just the pandemic that causes it. The pandemic was just the big rock that hit us and said, oh my God, right? And so you look at, a lot of the risks from, COVID-19, and what's interesting is business continuity and productivity is the highest one, and then obviously health and safety. And it just kind of, it's funny, you'd figure health and safety was number one, but business continuity is top of everybody's mind. So how can I keep my business up and running and fully accessible so that my end users can work effectively? And again, this was a poll done by Citrix via Gartner, and so it's a pretty interesting snippet of information. And we just ran a poll, right? And here, I'll bring the stats up really quick. My enterprise, 46% of you said that 50 to 79% of my employee base is going to work from home. All right, now a year ago, you might have been completely on the other end of the spectrum. Now, what's interesting is our employees productive? And I'm sure we could have a fun conversation around that. I've seen data out there that says, hey, my employees work more, so they're more productive, et cetera. But 46% of you said that the majority of my workforce is working from home moving forward for now, right? And maybe that changes. Who knows? So yes, is working from home the new normal? And I'd say, yeah, it is, based on the data. And so, here's another snippet of information. So outside our polls, and it's funny, our polls don't really align, right? So you wonder, when was this poll taken? Because I think depending on when the polls are taken depends on the purview, right? So 20, on the upper 10% will remain or less will remain working from home. And Gartner, maybe they got to rerun their poll because they did it back in March 30th, right? And so I would argue if they ran this poll again, I think these numbers would shift. And so that's kind of my take and my input. So with that, I'm going to pause really quick and ask a question to my panel. Hey, Jason, so what are some of the other anecdotes you're seeing around business continuity planning today? So like, what are some of the things you're seeing with customers that are forcing them to really think about a plan and remote work, et cetera?
Well, you touched on some really great points, Pete, in the slides you just showed. So in that last graph you showed, again from Gartner showing back in March, I agree with you 100% that if that was taken in March, we were still under the assumption that this was going to be, over in a few weeks, and people were, 2-3 week lockdown and we'd be back, right? And we're not there. So. Yeah. Our own industry polling that Citrix does, because we talk to a lot of customers around the world, and we're seeing a stat being thrown around is about 40% of people that are going to be remaining in a fairly heavy work from home stance. So the other thing you kind of brought up was the shift of mindset. And again, I've been doing this for a long time, just like you have, Pete. And in the old days, and you were talking about what BCP and disaster recovery was before, we were thinking about protecting infrastructure, right? So we were thinking about, okay, tornado through the data center or fire or that kind of stuff. And this changed our mindset a little bit because what really got attacked was our workforce. So it's the endpoint, it's the user. Yep. And so the difference in how we treat that brought up a whole new series of challenges. And I've talked to many of my customers, and actually, quite frankly, brand new customers that never had Citrix before that contacted us directly because of everything that's gone on. And people were in very different stages as far as their level of readiness. And I'll use Citrix as ourselves as an example. Much like you, Pete, you mentioned you've worked at home your entire career. I came out of healthcare, so everything was around being at the office. Moving to Citrix, working out of the house. This hasn't been as big a deal for us, but things have changed. I mean, you might have noticed that our big in-person events aren't happening, right? So we've had to come up with new ways to engage with customers. So that's been a change. A lot of our customers, though, it's been more around that reactive change. And so we've had customers, I've one in particular in my territory that they were forced to send 4,000 people home at a moment's notice. And so that was a challenge, and that was an infrastructure question for them. One of the things that their challenge was they were already using Citrix and quite frankly already using Citrix Cloud, but they were using on-prem hypervisors. And what they wound up having to do to be able to handle the load of the users now at home is they actually went to their DR, they had 2 physical data centers, their secondary DR data center, they physically moved all of the hypervisor hosts to the primary data center to be able to handle the traffic. Yeah. So then that came to a realization for them is, okay, now what do we do if we have a failure of a classic failure of a problem with that data center? How do we do that? And that spawned a whole nother topic, which is around DR in cloud. And that's been a big topic of conversation around many of my customers. How to do that and how to do that make sense. So that's one of the biggest pieces as well.
Yeah.
And then, and so one of the other things along with that, which kind of filtering it back towards the endpoint and this shift in where the users are coming from and how they're working, and I think this is something you're also going to touch on, is this also may have, in order to be able to get the users home, introduced some problems that were maybe unintentional, meaning
Yeah.
around security, right? So I've talked to many customers. I know you're going to touch on the VPN topic, but that was a hot topic because I think a lot of customers had this conversation internally with their IT teams and going, okay, we got to send everybody home. All right, cool. What do we got? We got VPN. All right, let's do that. And that was the knee-jerk reaction to get them to continue to function. But maybe they also introduced some other problems. And I think that kind of moves us into a conversation around security on that. So that whole idea of how do we handle with business continuity from a DR perspective, and then the security topics, I think are probably the biggest things that we're seeing in customer conversations right now.
Awesome. And yeah, we'll touch upon the security stuff in a little bit deeper in a second. So definitely it's a hot topic, right?
Yep.
All right, so let's dive in. So we got, elements, right? And I'm not going to sit here and preach to you guys about the different phases of business continuity planning, but obviously the key here is have a plan, right? And have a team and have a way to communicate and test it. It'd be funny if I asked the polling question of how many of you tested your business continuity plan. And I know I work with enterprises that test it, and maybe they do it quarterly, maybe they do it yearly. But the question is, have you really tested it? Like, are you just doing a power off and a cutover? Are you truly testing your plan? And I think that's the one area I would harp on is, yeah, have a plan, but test it. And then finally, obviously your people need to know what the process is if, a hurricane hits and they got to work from home, or a snow day hits and they got to work, from home because a blizzard hits. I mean, it's not just the pandemic. I think this pandemic has really defined not only the ability that, hey, we can work remote, it also has defined that, we have to have a plan. And so, there's areas that you got to address, and I don't want to harp on these too much because, again, I think these are all known, but you got to be able to be seamless, right? So whether you're at your house working from your home office or in the office working from your nice, comfortable home office with no kids running around, the experience should be very similar, and you should be able to get to what you need to get to. Security is another big key, right? And we'll talk about that in a minute. And then finally, simplifying. So, how do you simplify not only the user's experience, but just getting to applications and getting to the various things within your enterprise. And so, those are the kind of the core things and the core premises that Citrix really is focused on when they've designed the workspace story. And you'll learn, and one of the things I love, and I worked at Citrix for 10 years in full disclosure, it's very end user focused. It's got a very design thinking approach. And that's one of the things I love about the Citrix products is that they always put the user in the forefront to make sure that you guys are the ones that they're catering to. It's not, we're just going to give you a feature and throw it out there. And so, discover like, again, who needs access to what? Go talk to your end users. I always joke and say, projects fail not because of us, the IT guys and gals. It fails because the users don't like it. And if they don't like it, then guess what? They're not going to use it. And so if we make sure our users are happy, the project will be a success. Design, put design as your approach. Like, put design thinking as your first approach. And if you don't know what that is, reach out. I'm a big believer in design thinking. And then finally, validate. Definitely test, but also validate. Get a core group of test users and test your plan with those users and get inputs and get all facets of the business and test across the business, not just in a silo, right? And so those are my big tips, as I look across BCP. And Citrix enables this. We're going to talk about all these in a minute. But before I dive in, hey, are there anything else that people need to consider, Jason, when we're talking? I know security is one, but what are some other things? And harp on security a little bit as well.
Well, security obviously is a big focus, but before I get to that, there's one other that just kind of came to mind as an important aspect on one of your previous slides there, and that was the ability to actually have visibility into what's going on. Because one of the things that's become apparent now is the need to understand what's happening in the environment. Things like around analytics has become a very big big push as far as things that are being designed at Citrix, as well as things that are being asked for by our customers. And being able to know how things are performing, what kind of experience the users are actually having, is kind of key. If you're answering the question, are the users having a good day, and your only answer is, well, they're not calling the help desk, you're probably in need of some additional visibility. And I know I lived that very much from the hospitals, my hospital days. So that was pretty much it.
So Jason, since you're on the topic of hospitals, and we got a really good question around HIPAA, how, where does HIPAA fall in all this? So, if they're using their own workstations, et cetera, you worked in the hospitals, like, how does HIPAA play in all this? That's a great question, Terry.
That is a great question. So as far as the data itself, that's really kind of enabled based on the hybrid capabilities of what Citrix Cloud provides. So understand, when we talk about Citrix Cloud, we're talking about the management plane, the backend infrastructure of Citrix. The workloads, in our terminology today, we refer to them as VDAs, the virtual desktop agents. They're formerly known as your XenApp and XenDesktop VMs. Those can be wherever you want to. So in a hospital scenario, most likely those are going to wind up being in the data center or data centers that are under the control of the hospital, where the EMRs and the PACS and everything else, where the patient PHI data is. So that's keeping that all secure. If they've moved into the ability to have other things like that in the cloud, maybe managed services like a hosted EMR, things like that, we also facilitate that. But where we kind of move into really facilitating some of this, Pete, is around getting into the realm of kind of a hot buzzword nowadays, zero trust. Yep. Zero trust computing, simple idea, the idea that there is no concept of a trusted person, entity, network, device. All things are considered untrusted and continuously validated. So the ability to have that stuff safeguarded, one of the things that Citrix brings to the table on that, which you may be touching on in your security section, is around the contextual access capabilities that Citrix provides. So imagine two users, one, or maybe it's the same user, has two different devices. Maybe they've got a corporate-owned laptop that is a known security posture on that device. It's managed by IT, and they've also got their home PC.
Yep.
Different security postures on those, and we can detect that and be able to not necessarily allow or deny access per se. Yep. If they're on the less trusted device, we can maybe turn some features down. Say, I'm gonna let you have access to your app, but I'm gonna maybe not let you have access to your local drives. Maybe I'm not gonna let you take data out of the data center, but only put data in. Those types of things. All of that plays back into HIPAA. So yeah, definitely lived in that world very, very heavily.
Yeah, one of the things too is the endpoint, right? So there are solutions in the community that could help mitigate and standardize the endpoint. Companies like Igil, as an example, do a great job at not only providing an endpoint in the enterprise that could be locked down and secured, but also make a portable, we'll call it micro thin device to plug into a home user's computer and temporarily turn it into a Igil thin client as well. So the device, you can kind of control the device story as well. And then to your point, you can use access and access control to be able to lock down the experience. So great point. So let's dive into the security conversation. And Chris, good question. We'll chat about that in a second. So bear with us. So hey, we're in this new normal, and there's a lot of things to consider, right? And I'm not going to harp on this too much, but we got COVID. The pandemic hit. All of us started working from home, and everybody's running around in IT going, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, right? And really your goal was, hey, I got to keep the lights on and just get my workers working. Now we're realizing, man, this could go on for another 3, 6, maybe more, right? And for anybody that has work from, kids working in their house right now, you're probably going, please no, right? And especially maybe your wives or your husbands, if it depends, right? And but then the new normal, right? What is the new normal? In the survey, again, I'll harp on the survey, 46% of you said, hey, a lot of my workforce is going to continue to work from home. So how does Citrix fit into this story? And so, hey, listen, Citrix does a lot, all right? and we're going to cover a tip of the iceberg today. So if you have any questions at all beyond this session, myself, XenTegra, and Citrix together, we can take you through any of these topics, at any time. So don't hesitate to reach out and say, hey Matt, hey Pete, hey team, can you take me into, hey, how does Citrix do endpoint management? So don't be afraid to reach out and have us deep dive into some of the other functionalities post today's session. All right, so let's talk about security, right? Security is key, and Jason's covered it, and zero trust is even more important, right? But let's not tick off our users. We can probably use another word. So the question is, how do we couple the experience with security, right? And mesh those two together and make it experience and security. And that's something that Citrix has really worked hard on to not only enable, but truly live by it, right? And not only, so they eat their own dog food every day. We do too. And I'm telling you right now, if you get it done and you get it done right, the experience is not only awesome, but it's very secured. And so the question is how, right? And so we're going to talk a little bit about this in a second, but VPN-less access. There's always debates out there on, do you use VPN with Citrix or without, or no VPN with Citrix? And I would argue do the latter. SSO, how does SSO fit into the Citrix story? Again, you want to dig into that, let me know. We can tell you all the integrations, all the cool things that Citrix is doing around SSO and the various vendors in the community. Web filtering, browser isolation. Yes, Citrix does this, not only in session, but on the endpoint now via what's called App Protect. All right, if you want to dig deeper into that, let me know. It's one of my favorite topics right now. And then contextual access. Jason has talked about this, right? How do I put context around access? I might be in Starbucks today. I might be in my home office, or I might be in the headquarters, the main office, right? How do I control access? And then, great question earlier, HIPAA, right? Governing the data. How do I control the data? Where does it sit? Where is the data at rest? There's a lot of cool stuff that we could talk about, Terry. So great questions. And again, keep the questions coming. And then finally, zero trust access. Don't trust anybody, right? Make them jump through hoops to get into your enterprise. And I that's probably a bad analogy, but the reality here is Citrix resolves a lot of these with a VPN-less approach. So for those who have been doing gateway since its early days when it was called the CAG, you all know. But for those who are still saying, oh, hey, what's this thing called gateway? You definitely want to dig in and talk to guys like Jason and Todd and Andy, because we're going to take you through and educate you on the value of not only gateway, but the tried and true, what was usually called ICA proxy or ICA proxy, right, for us old school guys. But the reality here is Citrix can provide this VPN-less approach with the gateway service. And what's great about it is it's available in all the geos. And we're going to talk about something really cool in a minute that's going to change a lot of your minds of why you haven't moved to Citrix Cloud yet. And you can only access what you publish and what you put out there. That's the other key thing. So when you have VPN, depending on how you structure it, you might not be able to lock it down as much as you would like. Citrix allows you to lock it down to what content you want the users to have. But then user experience is key, right? And then finally, all your data can flow through the data center. So back to the HIPAA question, the PCI question, things like that. You can control where the data is at rest. You can control where your operating systems sit. So you have that control. The communication from the client to the edge is secured. And then once they get into their VDI session or their session-based computing session, they're ready to go. And this is the zero trust framework. And just to really summarize, right? Here's some of the issues you'll see with VPN, and I've witnessed this firsthand. I've seen it with customers, and I've helped customers through this. I'll cherry pick a couple here. It's not scalable, right? And so really think about, how do I create this VPN-less experience and make it scalable? But user experience is where you see the biggest hit. I love it when I get a call from my friends who work in finance or and they're like, oh, I use VPN to get to Citrix. And I'm like, you do what? And I'm like, nah, we got to talk. And I wish I can get in front of your IT. So again, there's a great podcast that we did about VPN or not. definitely check that out. It was written by the blog that was written by a good friend of mine, and he's been in the community for a long time. And listen, I'm not going to harp here on why it's better. We're going to tell you about it in a second. But one of the things I'm going to say is you really need to look at Citrix Cloud, and we're going to give you the reason why at the very end. So you want to stay tuned. All right. But I'm gonna pause for a second and let Jason highlight some other areas potentially that I missed, because he's the expert here. Where else does security play in business continuity planning, and how does Citrix enhance it, Jason, and Todd and Andy for that matter, if you guys want to chime in as well.
Well, thanks. One of the things I want to kind of just go back on just for a second before we get into that, you touched on it around the differences between doing the VPN and the not. There's a great analogy that I like to throw out around that, and that is, think about a VPN as an open door to the network. And I kind of think back to going into customers for customer meetings back when we used to do those things. And I had a thought around this, thinking, how weird would it be if I was to walk into a customer's office, sit down in a conference room, and just say, hey, do you mind if I plug my laptop into your wall port? We just really don't do that, right?
Yeah.
You're kind of doing that when you're talking about doing a VPN. You're taking what are possibly unknown types of devices. Yeah, it really should be corporate-owned devices only, but how many, I'd like to see a poll on this one actually, is how many of you allow unsecured devices through a VPN? The idea of doing it through Citrix, though, looking at it that way, think about it rather than an open door to the network, think about it as a window where you're looking through. You're not actually entering. So going back to what you were talking about with the old days of the CAGs and the gateways and things like that, you're air gapping that data center. So that traffic actually terminates there, and that the user's traffic, that device traffic, when you're creating a VPN, all that client's traffic is going through that VPN tunnel. And there may be a degree of stuff that is things you don't want. As far as how the security piece plays to business continuity, something that I touched on, and you had it on one of your other slides here, was around the idea of analytics and understanding around this. And this is something that's a bit newer. We've been doing it now for a couple of years with one aspect, which is the security analytics. And we've expanded that now into also performance analytics, which I'll touch on too. But the idea around these are cloud-based services, regardless of whether you got your on-prem or in cloud, it doesn't matter. That actually will work with on-prem only customers as well. The idea around this is all of our products have been instrumented. So there's nothing to install or deploy, which is pretty cool. And that also includes the Workspace app client. So all the way from the endpoint through the entire infrastructure and all the solutions, being able to gather analytics around that, coupled with an AI and machine learning behind that, to make that not only just raw data, but actionable data and showing what's going on, as well as the ability to take actions. Those could be administrator initiated or even automated actions. So in an idea with the security analytics, the users, think about it as user behavior analytics. Over time, we understand what the users do on a normal basis, what devices they're coming from, where they're coming from, what times they usually work, what applications they usually run, things like that. And when things deviate from that, we notice. And then there can be certain thresholds that could be set for certain things to take place. So for instance, if the users are assigned a risk score, as that risk indicator goes up, we can have certain actions take place. So for instance, in a virtualized session, maybe users doing certain things that the administrator and the organization is deemed as risky, we can say now kick on session recording and actually record that user session, notify administrators, things like that, up to and including actually, terminating the session, logging the user off, things like that. The other piece is around the performance analytics, and I think just as important as well, because in your point of, is it security or performance? No, it's both. We want to have security and performance. The visibility into the performance section is just as important, and understanding how good of an experience are the users having. So again, the users are assigned a score, but in performance analytics, It's how good of an experience are they having?
Yep.
And if it's not good, are there any trends that are, what do they have in common? Is it users running a particular application? Is it users running from a particular location? Things along those lines that can help reduce time to resolution, which again goes towards user experience. Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. And all right, so let's jump in to kind of the tail end of this. But before I do, you kind of threw out a poll, so why not? Let's get the audience engaged a little bit. Make sure you guys aren't sleeping on us. But my enterprises uses VPN to access resources on my network. So I'm going to launch that poll. If you can take just a couple seconds to answer this, we're just curiosity since we threw it out there. Why not? Let's get a poll. Oh, I forgot to spell out gateway. I was typing on the fly. That's what happens when you do polls on the fly. But we'll give us a couple seconds. Audience, take your moment to answer the question, and just more of an anecdote for Jason and I to just have. Why not? So I love getting the audience involved. All right, so a couple more seconds. Going once, going twice, and last call. So we got a lot of folks who are using VPN to get to resources on their network. So hopefully, we can change that kind of mentality. And if you want to dig deeper with any of us, please reach out after the session, and we can dig deeper and show you some of the other cool things that we can't really show today, but because we have a lot to talk about. All right, so we're on the tail end here. Let's talk about Citrix Cloud. And one of my favorite features of Citrix Cloud is, and there's a misconception with it, is that one, it's I would just go and say, first off, no cloud is going to be ever highly available. However, or let me rephrase that, no cloud is always 100% bulletproof to an outage, right? And there's going to be a little blips here and there. In Citrix, I will say this first and be the first one in line to say this, that they've done a great job at addressing blips when it comes to Citrix Cloud. And one of the things I love is they're going to solve something very cool, and we're going to talk about it right at the very end here, around what they're doing to mitigate if there is a little blip. So to address truly business continuity, not only at the cloud level, but at the endpoint as well. And so for those who aren't using Citrix Cloud today, and I'll just go back to my little poll here, I'd say I'll add up 25, we'll say 66% of you still aren't really on Citrix Cloud. Let's say 76% of you, because a bunch of you said no, but we haven't migrated yet. And so, if you want to sit down and have a conversation on why Citrix Cloud, I highly recommend it. And the reason why, the first thing is you can manage your workloads across any cloud. It becomes your single pane of glass to manage not only your workloads, but user experience, security analytics, data protection, etc. And so really what you need to do is really focus on, the why I need to go to Citrix Cloud. And do you really want to be in the business of managing infrastructure, right? And that's what you need to think about. And so Citrix is saying, hey, we're going to take the stuff that you manage on premise, and we're gonna take that load for you, and you can focus on what matters, which is how do we provide the service to our end users. All right, and that's the focus of Citrix Cloud, is giving you the ability to provide the service, the app, the VDI session, etc. And so again, how do I get there? And we can talk a lot about how you get there. And one of the things I'll highly recommend is check out off the documentation page. It's called Tech Zone. And under Tech Zone, they have the migration tool now. And I highly recommend checking that out. And they can help you go from being an on-premise environment to kind of that hybrid to being a fully Citrix Workspace with intelligence setup. And bear with me, we got something really cool we want to talk about at the very end. I'm excited that we were allowed to talk about this. So I don't want to steal Jason's thunder, and then we'll show a little video. But your goal is to get to this thing called Workspace with Citrix Intelligent Workspace experience. All right. And if you want to dig into that, let me know. I can take you through a nice little demo and dig into what is Citrix Workspace and what is the Intelligent Workspace experience. All right. And one of the things, again, Tech Zone, check it out. Great article up there on migration. Now, it is fully backward compatible, but there's something we're going to talk about in a second, that this might not be a need anymore. However, if you want to keep storefront on premise, go for it. If you want to do both, you can. You can have that hybrid approach, and hybrid is kind of the theme here, right? And so really focus on, not only unplugging a lot of your on-premise stuff, but focus on how do you become hybrid first, then figure out how do you fully utilize the Citrix Cloud stack. So, Jason highlighted this, and we can't do it justice in an hour. I mean, there's a lot of cool stuff that Citrix Cloud does, but one of the key pieces here is the analytics, the visibility, the experience analytics, the secure access, but also another big piece is business continuity and being always up. And so I highly recommend, if you haven't, or you're still shy about going to Citrix Cloud, reach out to any of the folks here at XenTegra. Get me on the phone. I'll sit with you for an hour and I'll take you through. I love doing it. And I'll talk about why and what and how and where and all that good stuff, and get you kind of understanding what is Citrix Cloud and the why. So definitely check, take some time. I'll provide some resources on our follow-up email, and check out some of the other concepts. One of the other concepts I would highly recommend you check out is App Protect. It's a great add-on feature. So again, your goal is to get to this thing called Workspace. Your goal is to give your users this cool experience of being able to get to one pane of glass to get to their apps, their data, their documents, and these other cool things called micro apps. All right. So if you're interested in understanding what those are, come talk to me. And then finally, if you haven't really dabbled in the Workspace piece yet and you're still on storefront, no problem. Well, I always suggest do a slow cutover. Get your users used to it, and then start layering in all the other functionalities. Don't just pull the Band-Aid off. I mean, you can, but again, remember, the users are our gatekeepers, right? If they don't like it, then our project's gonna fail. So we got to kind of ease them into it, right? And that's all I recommend that as an ex-product manager. All right, so Jason, let's talk about any other things you'd like to share before we jump into our little video here. But anything you want to highlight, and if you want, I'll let you kind of tee up the video really quickly.
Well, I think one of the things I'd like to share with you is the whole business continuity topic has been taken incredibly seriously by Citrix. I'm actually part of a task force that has been put together on this exact topic. And really one of the cool parts about this is the way Citrix runs. It's really kind of an amazing entity, an organization. We take feedback from the field and actually roll that into product features and enhancements. And that's kind of what we're tasked with. And if you actually look at it over time, this is nothing new. A good 70–80% of our feature enhancements actually come from recommendations from the field and from customers who are saying, I really wish we could do this. And so that's in the process of what we're building out here. So there's a lot of resources being lined up to enhance things like BCP. And that's one of the things I kind of brought today, and it's kind of an interesting little topic. So I brought something that you guys are going to see that no one, period, has seen yet. This is actually the first viewing of this. This is really new. So one of the questions that has always come up, and it's been a topic that's kind of kept people from running in Citrix Cloud, was what happens if the cloud itself is unavailable? Well, think about this. Your authentication is there, your storefront's up there. What happens if you can't get there? Well, is that a deal breaker? Well, we've put a lot of thought in this, and this is what we've come up with. This is a new feature. It is right now in private tech preview, so it's close. Can't give you a date when this is going to go GA, but the fact that it's in private tech preview is a pretty good sign. We're referring to this now as service continuity. So to set the stage on the video, what's going to happen is they're going to simulate a failure of Citrix Cloud and be able to still get to the resources they need. So without that, go ahead and play that, Pete.
All right. All right. So I'm going to try to make this work, guys, because I didn't have access to getting the video. Hold on. Let me pause it really quick. Make sure it's coming out the right speaker so I can get my mic over it. There we go. All right.
That's when the cloud is unavailable. In the past, we would introduce the concept of local host cache and recommend they keep a storefront and gateway on-prem as a fallback. For customers looking to adopt cloud solutions, having to build out on-prem components to address business continuity and then communicate that to users during an outage event is not ideal. To answer this challenge, we have been developing a solution known as service continuity. Let's take a look at what this might look like for a user. So you'll see here, I have my Workspace app. It has been configured to connect to my Workspace experience hosted by cloud. And I've got my micro apps and all my apps and desktops and files. I'm going to go ahead and launch my enterprise desktop. Now, this is going to look familiar to what you're used to seeing, right? My client is connecting here, and it's going to bring up my enterprise desktop. It's going to single sign me in, just as we would expect to see. And so for many customers, this is normal, right? There's no outage happening at this point. Everything works just as we would expect. So my desktop is here. I'm going to go ahead and log off of this, and we're going to simulate a failure of Citrix Cloud. Like, I can't resolve the Workspace URL. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to close this out. I'm actually going to exit my Workspace app. And we're going to do some little malicious thing here. And I'm going to change this so that it forces my client to think that, you know, the Workspace URL is on my local computer. I'm going to save that setting. So now if I even go to the web, let's say, just to prove a point, if I go to that Workspace URL for that customer site, you'll see it can't be reached. So I'm going to go ahead and close this browser, and I'm going to start back up my Workspace app. What you will see in here is it's going to have a different look and feel. For starters, it's going to go back to, I guess, what we could call the classic Workspace experience, you know, the V1 workspace. You'll notice that my micro apps have disappeared. I no longer have my feed. I no longer have my actions available to me. But I do have access to some of my applications. Now, obviously, Salesforce was a SaaS app that had been configured in Citrix Cloud. And since I can't get to the URL, I can't do that authentication and sign into that. But I still, you'll notice my desktops here aren't grayed out. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and launch that same enterprise desktop. And you're going to notice a slightly different behavior from what we would typically expect to see from an end user experience. So it's opening up, it's in a windowed instead of being full screen like it was a little bit ago. And I can expand that to full screen once the desktop is connected. But you will notice that something has changed, right? Some settings have kicked in, some cached capabilities around policies. So you'll notice the watermark has been turned back on at the moment because this server does also have that capability turned on it. But it's actually prompting me to log in. And so I'm going to go ahead and log in as my test account. Password, and it's going to let me into my desktop. Now this connected me to the same desktop I was logged into before. The watermark disappears because it knows my session doesn't need to have the watermark applied to it anymore, and I'm in, right? I am, my user account is in, and I'm logged in on this machine. Now I couldn't single sign me in because I did not connect to the workspace in Citrix Cloud, and it passed those credentials through to single sign me in, but it got me access to my desktop. And so that is the initial capability of service continuity, is at least being able to allow my end user access. So what did this take? What is happening in the back end? Well, we're using something known as connection leasing. So if you look, this is buried within my user profile on this machine. And what it has done is it has cached information about my connection into my local receiver client and stored it here on my machine. And so when the Workspace app comes up, attempts to connect, it can't get to the Workspace experience in cloud. So it renders the classic experience and it pulls what it knows to be my applications and populates them into that Workspace app. What it then does is when I want to go connect, it's leveraging the gateway service to make that initial connection, and it goes ahead and brokers the connection to the application or desktop in the back end, but I didn't single sign in because I didn't actually authenticate to the Workspace app, so it can't create that authentication token. That's why I get the prompt to log in. But from a business continuity perspective, being able to ensure my users can still get access, this is a great win, because now at least I can get my users in, they can keep working, and I didn't have to tell them to do something different. I didn't have to tell them to log into a different URL or reconfigure their Workspace app to hit my local host cache gateway environment on-prem. Now, what happens When everything goes back to normal, well, let's go ahead and show that real quick. So I'm going to sign out of this desktop. I'm going to exit my Workspace app again so that it can reread the correct settings. And we'll put that setting change back in there. Save. So now it will resolve the Workspace URL correctly for my account. And I'm going to start my Workspace app back up. And when it comes full screen, you will see that it's attempting to authenticate me. It's got my credentials cached in it because I had used it before. And so it sees everything back to normal. And so once the cloud is available, the user can just simply exit and restart their Workspace app. And now everything goes back to normal and I can use my Workspace the way it's designed.
So that is awesome, Jason. So yeah, that excites me. I've been asking, Todd will tell you, I think I've been preaching about the cloud, Citrix Cloud, since I joined XenTegra, and I've been asking for this feature pretty much since I joined XenTegra. So I'm excited that this feature is finally almost there, and I think it's a huge step in the right direction. So again, kudos. I love it. I love to see the progress, and being an ex-product manager at Citrix, I love seeing new features like this come out. So yeah, to the audience, if you have any final questions, please throw them in the chat window so we can try to get to them. We're running a little over. I understand. If you got to jump, please do. I'm just going to do the end cap here to make sure we're all good and we close this out for the recording. Any questions, throw them in the chat window. And let's just dive in. So where does XenTegra fit in all this? Well, XenTegra is a great partner of Citrix. We are one of their top platinum partners, and we're also one of their top cloud partners, probably in the world right now. And we love and breathe and live and breathe Citrix. And in fact, Andy, our founder and CEO, he worked at Citrix for a handful of years, was SE of the year, and formed the company on the notion of enablement and being a true partner. So Citrix, yes, is a focused partner of XenTegra. We live and breathe it. We love it, and we love end user compute and cloud. We're also a CSP, so if you want to talk through like the difference between CSP, MSP, etc., please do, as well as a gold Microsoft partner. If you want to see all our other partners, check them out at partners.xentegra.com, and you can see some of the many partners we partner with. All right, so back to the Bronco. So bronco.xentegra.com. There's one cool way you can actually get this Bronco, or not get it, but get into the drawing. And one of those ways is to do a simple thing called a micro assessment. So you could do a Citrix micro assessment, and we can come in and evaluate your environment, give you some good anecdotes on how to migrate to cloud, how to be business, have a good business continuity plan. And guess what? It's free. So you complete this micro assessment, that puts you in the drawing. We also do one for Citrix ADC. We also do one for core networking, as well as some others. So definitely check out the assessment option if you want to get into the Bronco campaign. Also, you can do a consult around staffing. Are you hiring? If you answered yes, we have a staffing division. So get us in touch with your hiring managers, your HR. You do this, that will get you into the drawing as well. So again, a couple ways you can get in the drawing. But let's just say some calls to action here. First, if we didn't cover something you didn't think you wanted to hear, reach out. We can dig into that. If you want to dig deeper on some of the other cool features within Workspace, please reach out. We can take you through those demos, okay? So again, we have a full bench of great consultants. If you're stuck in the mud, as I like to say, bring us on. We can help you get unstuck and really get you going with Citrix Cloud. All right, so again, lots of calls to action here. You'll get a follow-up email, and last call for questions. And I'll see if there's any good ones that we could do one more. So Justin, great input. I can't wait to work with you. Just saying. But again, final call for questions. And as we're waiting, Jason, any final thoughts or anything you want to add before we exit off today? And thank you for joining.
No, I think everything's been great. I really appreciate everybody joining today. We've had a great audience. And Pete, thanks for inviting me.
All right. Yeah. And Todd, Andy, thanks for joining us as well. I know you guys are busy men right now. And for all those on the phone, thank you for joining us. Check out next week. We're going to be talking MSIX on our webinar Wednesdays. And then finally, hey, Matt, thanks for corralling this topic. It was a great topic. And thanks to the Michigan team for pushing us to do this industry-focused webinar. With that, special call out to Citrix, and thanks for taking the time. And that is all. And as I always say, thanks for joining, and see you all on the flip side.